morning. Hope you enjoyed the keynote. I want to sprinkle in a little new FlexCare offering that we have. We engage with ThreatLocker. It's a new offering within FlexCare, puts you in control of the software, scripts, executables, and libraries that can run on your endpoints and servers. This becomes another important layer of your security. Check with your AM from Network Center for more information. This morning, I'd like to introduce Peter Orban, AI Technologist. And Peter's a seasoned technologist and go-to-market leader. Peter brings AI innovation with business impact, particularly in financial services. His journey spans big data, data science, ML, computer vision, and physical AI, with current focus on delivering low-latency inferencing solutions. At Lenovo, he helps customers modernize their data estate and deploy AI at scale, and turning complex infrastructure into a competitive advantage. I'd read the overview, but I'd rather you would listen to Peter talk about it.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. So first and foremost, a shout out to our partners, Network Center. I flew in yesterday morning, early morning, and I'm based in New York. And Tuesday, we had some of the white stuff coming down. And so I didn't quite know what to expect when I was coming in. Clearly, someone here knows what strings to pull, because this weather, I had no idea. And so thank you so much for our partners. They're clearly going out of their way. So with this, my name is Peter Orban, and I am an AI technologist at Lenovo's Enterprise AI Practice, new Enterprise AI Practice. I'll explain what these things mean. And my plan for today is to go beyond the hype and report back what we see in the market and explore as to how to move from buzzwords to measurable business value. Heads up, so that I told you early on, so this is not going to be a technical talk, although we can address or I can answer questions, but it will focus on the business side of the AI world. I will create some sort of a context to go into as a framework. Then I will explain what enterprise AI is and how we look at that. I'll give you a couple of examples across a few different verticals, and I will share lessons, 5 specific lessons that we learn in the market, as well as a 3-step plan. So that's what I'm going to do today. I think we can safely state that these are unprecedented. These times see unprecedented. Oops, there you go. That's what I meant to do. A period of unprecedented technological investment. Staggering numbers, 600% increase in enterprise spending alone since the last year. This is an astronomical promise, with other studies pointing to a roughly $4 return on every successfully invested buck in enterprise AI projects. But more importantly, this isn't just a technical trend. I mean, it's really changing the landscape. Just look at OpenAI. They started as a geeky little lab and suddenly turns into a full-fledged, for-profit organization, with rumors floating around about the first $1 trillion IPO coming. So this is really a promising new era emerging, at least if you buy into the hype. However, when you're out in the field and actually doing this, you see slightly different things. I'm assuming if you're into AI, you have come across the 95% number, the MIT NANDA study that points to the fact that only 5% of those that embark in enterprise AI see returns on the bottom line. Another study from McKinsey says that it's more than 80% of the companies that embark on this very AI journey, no benefit hits the bottom line, right? So let's just let that sink in. It is a lot of money, billions of dollars being spent, and the C-suite is not really seeing the return. So what's really going on? And what we find is that the failure is not the technology, it's execution. So this kind of creates 2 conflicting stories that you may have heard, right? On one hand, we hear that AI doesn't really work, and there's some credible data supports that. There was a paper published by a large tech company that mentioned that complex reasoning, LLMs struggle with complex reasoning, or the recent RLI study pointed out that only 2.5% of the jobs that were put out in TaskRabbit, if you're familiar with that, AI agent can reproduce faithfully. So but at the same time, we also see large companies, doing workforce adjustments, blaming it on AI. So the question is, so how come how the technology is not really working, yet at the same time it will take our jobs? So these two statements can't be true at the same time. So the answer is, there you go, somewhat predictable. This confusion is somewhat predictable. In this room, you're all familiar with the hype cycle. And that what we see is AI now reaching the trough of disillusionment. So it has proven itself in the sandbox initially. Now it has to go out in the marketplace and actually perform. This is the phase where the initial excitement meets the actually true hard reality of implementation, where the real work begins. So what we see is some sort of what we call the executive builder strategy schism. Executives are sold this gold rush narrative that you have to have AI, and AI is the latest thing, the shiny object, so they demand action. Then this vague mandate gets handed down to the IT folks who lack clear business goals and therefore measurement frameworks of what success would be. So they treat this as an isolated science project in a sandbox somewhere. Then this successful project is being presented back to the executives, who then ask the question, so what is the ROI? And because there's no ROI, since there was never really a definition of what the ROI is, the answer to that is that it fails because there's no ROI. So the technology itself does not fail, the execution. That's what we see. So this is probably a good time to explain how we think about enterprise AI. And there are a couple of drivers here. First of all, when we say enterprise AI, it refers to the integration of all advanced artificial intelligence technologies, not just LLMs, but machine learning, NLP, computer vision, and so on and so forth. So tools and techniques that have been around. So we are all looking at it in an integrated fashion. Second, it targets workloads like data analysis, process automation, prediction, predictive maintenance, or in-market predictions, customer service, fraud detections, and then so on and so forth. As we heard earlier today, there we go. The architectures are most likely hybrid, so combining on-prem and cloud solutions for a couple of reasons: scalability, compliance, security, stability. And markets tend to be, although they apply generally, what we see growth is financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, and a few other key verticals. And most importantly, maybe, that the key performance indicators are not technical, but business, operational efficiency, cost reduction, time to value, and so on and so forth. So this is, in our world, this is what enterprise AI is. The other critical part of enterprise AI is its vertical nature, because the KPIs, the outcomes, are related to the business. They are best interpreted in their own business context, right? So when I talk about efficiency, it means something very different in a retail banking environment, as opposed to in a manufacturing or healthcare. So that's why Lenovo is investing into a vertically oriented team. So I have a bunch of teammates across retail, healthcare, manufacturing, retail. That's my other Peter, and so on and so forth. And myself focusing on financial services and energy, utilities, and oil and gas. And the reason why we do this, having these folks with the vertical experience in place, is because this is really how you can talk to customers and speak their language, interpret their challenges, or identify opportunities in their very specific context, way beyond just the IT realm. This is going to be the most technical slide today. So this is sort of a snapshot of our stack. the solution stack. When we talk about enterprise AI, it all starts with the notion of safety and security and scalability on our TrueScale, which is a device as a service or anything as a service, and ThinkShield security solution. And on top of that come the infrastructure that go from AI PCs to servers to edge devices. And on the, top of that comes the partnership represented by, or a partnership with partners like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Red Hat, and so on and so forth, as we're going up on the stack. And on the next layer is our ISV program, the Innovators, AI Innovators program that we started about 4 years ago, where we specifically went out to identify startups that are relevant for these, focused on these verticals. We vet them, we certify their solutions, they certify our solutions, so we are able to deliver these solutions in a box. As no matter what vertical you're in, when you're contemplating, how do I start it, where do I go to, we do have a box with your name on it almost in every vertical. So that's why we think, there you go. The first step for most organizations is a horizontal use case. That's probably the easiest to get to for a couple of reasons. First of all, your employees, your coworkers are already using AI. What we see, unlike any other technical enterprise technology, and for that matter, any technology revolution, is that it's not top-down, it's not bottom-up, it's both at the same time. And it creates a really unique driver because the expectations by enterprise technology are rarely met with the expectations set by consumer-level technology. So if you're using ChatGPT or your coworkers use ChatGPT or Gemini or anything like that at home, and they see value from that, and they will try to bring it to the workplace, and it turns out that doesn't quite fit in the most solution. You can start creating the value, and we have solutions that extend these tools, so they make it enterprise ready or enterprise proof, but these are consumer products as they're what consumers are using. So almost always we see the first and easiest time to value, fastest time to value use case is a horizontal use case. Think of it as a chatbot or a tool that enables a local LLM that enables the access to your accumulated knowledge. So you may be a customer-facing role or an customer-facing organization, where the ability to pull up the relevant information right at the time when you need it matters. And so it's very easy to take your knowledge base and throw into this LLM on location or in the data center, and provide a user interface to your users to be able to interact with that. So bar none, this is number one. The number two, or depends on who you are, parallel to this, is the external version of this, right? So all of us have customers who need the respect and deserve the time from us, but our resources are limited. And so how do you handle L1, L2, L3, and so on and so forth? Well, AI to the rescue. We have several solutions, and actually, honestly, you will find several solutions out there that enable you to do that, taking the same information base that you already have accumulated and exist in your organization to organize, put in an LLM, and make it available as a friendly chatbot to your users on a website or some other form. All right. However, the real value starts when we start going vertical. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Starting with healthcare. One of our partners that we work with, a company called Aisha, used one of our Think System server to train a model that analyzes MRI scans 99% faster than human scan. Right? So there's no reason. Now this was a large hospital deployment, but there's no reason why a regional clinic couldn't do this with X-rays, right? So therefore, freeing up the time from the doctor, right? So it already presents the suggested solution to the doctor, whose only quote-unquote task is then to verify the results. So you see how you can squeeze much more out of your precious employee times. Higher education. La Jolla Country School wanted to make sure that their students are in as safe as possible environment. And so they used one of our, and I think we are not mentioning it, but one of our edge intelligence provider using our ThinkEdge server lines, who used the existing camera system. So nothing had to be done other than just putting a server on the ground, an edge server on the ground, and then deploy that software on that. And then now uses this a privacy-friendly mode to identify potential threats immediately, right, without having to route the information externally. So a use case for education. There you go. Manufacturing. Similar vision solution to healthcare, but deployed very differently. It's about detecting defects. And so this solution detects defects with 99% accuracy. And again, that's not in the cloud, right, on the shop floor, and there's no reason that a local machining shop couldn't do the same, right? So literally just you put this small little server there using the existing systems you already have, and we'll be able to, or the system will be able to spit out the quality control. On the flip side, in retail, which is another example, we work with Kroger, but every retailer faces the same situation. Shrinkage is an issue. So there's no reason why you couldn't take, again, one of these devices, put the model on that which we have, and start gaining back what is rightfully yours. So a couple of examples, large customers, small customers, very small customers, literally being able to use the same systems. But looking ahead a little bit, what we see 2026 is going to be about, if it's not already here, is agents. I'm not going to bore you with an agentic definition. You will find a lot of them. I don't think we agree on how exactly to define agent, partly because it actually changes so quickly. But it's enough to say that these are applications or software tools that have agency, pun intended, right? So they are supposed to be able to act on their own to accomplish an objective. So the thing to note here, that deployment is accelerating. So if you haven't started looking at, you have to start looking at this now. It's the evolution is not linear; it's exponential. And so we are also jumping into this. Lenovo is launching its own agent management platform. There will be no shortage of folks who will offer various different agents. Almost every application today out there will have some agentic capabilities, or they will claim some agentic capabilities. So we see the next emerging frontier is not so much the agent, but how do you coordinate those co-workers, potential future co-workers? So agentic management, Lenovo's agentic management platform is something that will be able to offer them. So these are a couple of examples. With that, I wanted to move on and start some of the lessons, or share some of the lessons that we have learned in the marketplace. When I cite numbers, and I will cite quite a few numbers, these are not our internal numbers, as you will not be surprised. We're not at liberty to share anything of that nature from our customers. So I did a little bit of research and pulled those in, but the lessons are all the same. So it starts at the top, no surprises here. Enterprise AI is fundamentally, it's a business strategy that is enabled by technology, and it's not an AI initiative. It is really fully contingent on a committed C-suite and the board that will drive the necessary organizational changes and resources your way to be able to execute it. Another important component is the vision, a clear top-down AI vision tied to core business outcomes like revenue growth. So you have to have a business indicator in mind as you're going. It can't be just a science project. And that will be the primary catalyst for enterprise-wide alignment, right? So the question coming up, and there will be dynamics, why are we doing this? What success looks like? And so this is what the C-suite has to set. Turns out that there's a direct correlation between executive sponsorship and return. In fact, there's a report that cites that organizations with C-level sponsorship are significantly more likely to see ROI, specifically 78% more likely to see ROI than those that lack sponsorship. So C-level sponsorship is critical. And it's very obvious because it's only the top that can break down data silos. The top can unlock the resources and can give the direction, right? So it doesn't get stuck in the pilot purgatory. However, the most important, if there's one thing that probably emerges above all, is change management, right? So it's really a cultural shift from the side of the organization. There will be a lot of confusion, right? People will be also asking all sorts of questions. So what happens to me, for example? That's one of the first questions we hear all the time. And what happens to how we get stuff? There are answers to that, and they will go beyond the single conversation. But the management, the leadership needs to drive that and answer these questions. So the C-suite leads the way. No surprises there, right? You heard the term doing things better, which is efficiency, versus doing better things, which is efficacy, right? And it's very attractive for most organizations to walk down efficiency first, right? So this is how we do things, and if I can just change out this step and put in this widget, I can save time, money, something, right? And so I get the same, but at half the effort. Very attractive, and AI can do that, but it's a waste of the talent, right? So it's very important, and sometimes this is the way to go into it. This is how you sell it to the CFO. This is how you sell it to the C-suite. But this is just a step one. So you have to move beyond efficiency because AI can do so much more of that. It will enable the creation of novel products and services. From hyper-personalization, customer experience that can increase retention by 25%, which is a piece of information found to AI simulations, right? So which will accelerate R&D. If you follow what NVIDIA is offering in the Omniverse program, you see that one of the benefits of simulation, physical simulation, is that you can speed up time and you can simulate things at 1,000x or so to see what happens in material world and so on and so forth. So you have the ability to create things that otherwise would not be possible. Another example, if you have customers where in-person exchange is important, let's say you're financial institutions and it's important, how else could you use the time when you have this precious moment, when you have a customer in person at your outlet, how can you make more out of that time if your, let's say, teller or executive who is interacting with the customers don't have to worry about, let's say, creating a follow-up report or something like that. So it opens up the opportunity to think about what else could be done. It also will help with driving competitive differentiation. If you are using prediction and predictive insights, figuring out where the market's headed, you can make your move faster than the other guys. You can preempt them. You can outflank them. You actually will make you more competitive. And lastly, it's a two-way street. So generally, we say that technology should solve real problems. In fact, sometimes we joke that our role is, taking the technology that is in search of a problem is to help it. But it turns out that when you have such powerful tools as AI, sometimes the ability that what AI can do, bringing back into the business and explain to them that these are things you could do will also help create and foster new ideas. So it's not only them coming to you what they want, but you can also go and tell them what they should be doing or what they could be doing. All right, lesson 3. This is technology, and it all starts with data. We know AI is only as good as the data is trained on. In fact, the single biggest barrier is not budget, not readiness or lack of anything else, but lack of readiness in data quality. Legacy systems and fragmented data infrastructure actively tend to hold back AI adoption. 84% of organizations still report their storage is not fully optimized for AI, so you can imagine that trying to deploy effectively a program would be very difficult. The data that is locked into departmental silos is also a primary impediment we find. It will undermine the effectiveness of the program. Just think back to the example I gave, the bot, right? So the local GPT, if it can only access a fraction of the data that it would be helpful, it can only be fractionally useful. And lastly, what we find that there are some what we call AI masters, organizations that have mature data practices in modern infrastructure, they almost always come out on top, right? So regularly industries tend to lead here because they already had to put their house in order when it comes to data management, or generally compared to some other verticals. And so they see revenue improvements up to almost 24%, almost 25%, and then cost savings of 25% versus those organizations that don't have that in place. So this is on the technology side. All right. Culture. So as I think I mentioned a few times, technology itself is not enough. This is about change management. So things will change. Things are changing, and they will change even more. And for any organization to adopt that, it needs to be managed. The process needs to be managed. So critical choke point we find skills, AI-ready skills specifically. It turns out that while 75% of companies claim they are adapting to AI, only 35% of the companies, or those workers receive training. So there's a gap in there. So if your workers or employees are not trained, they will not use it how to use it effectively. The literacy should go from top to bottom and all out to the front line. So leaders need to grasp AI's strategic implication to make informed decision, but then also folks out in the field also need to understand why this is strategically important and how to use these tools responsibly and effectively in their daily workflows. In a previous life, I spent a lot of time working with folks in field service, right? So someone like, let's say, HVAC technician who goes out and then maintains equipment, and their ability to access information is always tricky, and we've seen all sorts of experiments, wearable devices, all these things, so they can keep their hands free while they are working. And this is one of those opportunities that if you could give them access to all the relevant information in a conversational format with an LLM, how much more effective could they be in an individual session? And lastly, collaboration, and particularly cross-functional collaboration. It can't be just an IT project. You have to have the business line, and the legal folks, management, and so on and so forth, all involved. All right. How are we doing? Last but definitely not least is governance. Governance is about trust, right? So this is going to be a bumpy ride no matter what, mostly for us humans with emotions, right, as we go through that. And so trust is paramount, whether it's a stakeholder, whether it's your customers, whether it's your employees, whether anyone in your orbit, they need to trust that you're doing the right thing for the right reason. This is probably the strongest precondition of responsible and scalable growth. So one way we saw it working well is establishing this cross-functional council, sort of a driving force in the organization. You know, every stakeholder being there, governing that, determining what's right, what's wrong. But there are, other ways to approach it, or additional ways. One is, which is what we call a risk-based framework. And NIST has a tool that they call the Risk Management Framework, RMF, right? So out there in the public domain available, it will help you kind of shape your thinking as to how to classify the potential risk instead of how to allocate resources accordingly. And then lastly, what we find that ethics and responsibly embedded, it really is a competitive differentiator. People will trust you. Your customers will trust you. Your employees will trust you. And then that's a hard-earned trust that you can put to a good use. So 5 lessons. And once you learn your lessons and adopt these lessons, so what do you do now? How does that work? Step 1 is the assessment. There you go. So it pays to perform a rigorous, an objective assessment of what you have. The organization current state across data, infrastructure, talent, culture. What do you have today? This will give you the critical gaps, will give you, most importantly, a data-driven baseline for the AI journey, where you started, and it will help you to prevent from investing in projects prematurely, right? So we see a lot of customers, you know, wanting to jump on a hype train and say, well, we need something. And we do offer actually a lot of stuff that you can just buy, take off the shelf, and will work right out of the box. But framing it so it's long-term and actually built, it's much more. So you can have it for experimentation. You know, typically we see these dual tracks in an organization. One is the business, the other one is the technology. And so it's okay to run them in parallel. But this is a business exercise. So not just, so the technology in service. So just remember that. Then articulating the vision. So where are you headed? Now you know where you are, where you headed. So what is the clear vision for AI for your organization, right? There are general patterns. It won't be difficult to hard, but for you, how you work, it will be specific to you. You know your values. You know what customers love about you and why they want you. A perfect example, I think this morning we heard, you know, 40 years in business and a lot of customers with all. I mean, there's magic there. Clearly, it's not an easy thing to accomplish. So you know, everyone in orange shirt, that why this is happening. So this is for you to articulate what your exact vision looks. Then, yet again, I'm using the term cross-functional governance body. So it's important that every stakeholder in the company, it's not just the line of business, it's not just the sales, it's not just the technology. Everyone needs to participate, else it will not be effective. And only then comes the idea about use cases. It has to be business use cases. Now, in real life, we see a lot of these being parallel, but the decision to what use cases prioritize, it really preceded by all these previous steps, or what really matters. And then almost always we see some sort of prioritization around effort and in fact, I think that's my next slide, exactly. Pilots, this is when pilots start, and then you have to prioritize them. Obviously, you'll have more ideas than you can execute, and or you'll have time to execute or resources to execute. So these dedicated and cross-functional teams with clear ownership and, dare I say, agile methodologies will focus on this to ensure focus and deliver speed and iterate as needed. Then measure. So track how it's going. You already have the baseline. You establish the baseline. So track this as you are going forward. And then track this in the business KPIs. So reduction in the process time, increase in conversion rate, whatever that is. So you see the technology actually delivers. Then you select, or what we find it makes sense to select pilots designed to deliver measurable ROI, not longer than 3 to 6 months. In other words, I think it's almost self-evident. Don't pick the hardest project first, right? You need success stories quickly to show to the rest of the organization, to show to the governing bodies, to show to the sponsors that it works, right? So don't pick the hardest. I'm sure there will be no shortage of hard projects. Pick the one that will deliver value early on, and document it all. Right, so this is what your playbook will be. So as you're documenting the steps of work, what didn't work, from the data work that you have done, the model preparation, user adoption, change management, all sort. This will create this repeatable and scalable playbook. So that's the proof stage, pilot and proof, and then finally comes scaling and the actual transformation. So you have this playbook that you have developed in the previous stage, and so you can strategically roll out AI solutions across the other departments and across the other parts of the company. However, this is not a big bang. This is deliberate, sometimes slow, right? One step at a time. So the organization needs to adopt. You know, the still lingering questions, occasional fears need to be quelled. People need to see firsthand. We see that it makes a lot of sense to establish something like your local AI COE, Center of Excellence. You will have folks emerging from this process that just, show more propensity. They like it, the power users, and so on and so forth. So it makes sense to formalize this because a lot of the experience you learn in the ground, in the trenches, will transfer very easily elsewhere in the organization as you are going for that. This also becomes a repository of information or data that's specific to you. So your RAG databases, and so on. So from both technical and business process. MLOps, or machine learning operations, we find it's useful to establish frequently in the context of a COE, which helps with the continuous monitoring, maintenance, and retaining of models, right? So what you will find that model drift gets introduced, and there's a lot of technical challenges. Sort of this is a more technical version of a AI COE. And ultimately, the goal is to move from a portfolio of AI projects to an AI-infused operating system. And I just realized that as I was delivering my remarks, I got stuck on the previous slide. So thank you for motoring with me. So these are the 3 stages of what we find that works. Now, this is a full menu, and it's, again, not everything may be applicable to you as you're going forward. The structure and the framework is, the path is, right? So all the built-in safety factors, the responsible AI, the measure and track, think in KPIs, bring everyone along the journey. And honestly, we're still early. No one knows better, right? So we all make mistakes, as we go forward. It's an important thing to catch them and correct them. So with this, what I wanted to offer, and this time I'm pressing the right button, resources. So we have a lot of resources at Lenovo that we offer to our customers and partners. We see most folks are just starting out this journey. They get this lot of hype. This is most of our customers kind of go between FOMO and panic, right? As to like, what am I supposed to do? Who's doing what? Can't really get reliable information. Everyone's like, there's some sort of a pitch every time I turn to someone, and like they will try to tell me they have been in AI for the last 50 years. How do I work? So a lot of the resources you can get from our or to other resources, just scan a QR code and you will get access to also, you'll see all the instructions. So we have a couple minutes for questions. I will not necessarily see if you raise your hand. So, and for the recording, or I think they online, unless you have a microphone, they will not hear your question. So I think, I think we have a microphone going around.
You volunteered to ask a question.
That's always the hardest.
Peter, thank you very much for this overview. I think it's very helpful. Briefly, how do we engage, if we want to engage from a financial institution, how do we reach you and your skill sets, and same for other verticals? How do we engage?
So you reach out to your Lenovo counterpart or a network center counterpart, and they will find me, right? So by the way, that email address you see up there comes to our team directly, right? So someone who will be able to identify the nature of challenge will pass it on to me. So that's the easiest. So that's a direct email to our team. It lands on our inbox.
Anybody would like to share where they are in the journey? What they've started with, what they've tripped on, etc.?
So just curious, do you have any examples of just stories, success stories from your team that you could share?
Yes, yes. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is that if you go to scan this QR code, you will get to the Lenovo Press site, lenovopress.com. I think that's the email, but if you just Google, you will find it. And we publish all our success stories we can publish, right? So not everything, but those that are typically quantified. So we have a whole host of successes across the various different verticals. Is there any particular vertical you're more interested in than others?
For me, particular finance, but yeah, just curious to hear maybe a short story or something that personal success that you've been a part of.
So in finance, what we find is finance is unique because in many ways, first of all, they are really ahead of most of the other verticals. They are the ultimate data-driven people. I mean, if you think about finance, data-driven approach back to like a credit score back in the 50s, I think in the late 40s, 1950s. So finance pioneered most of what we see in today's enterprise technologies, a lot of the data science. And so, however, that as a general statement, there's a fairly big gap between the major players, Citibank, JP Morgan, so on and so forth, versus, let's say, a regional bank or community banks, so we see big gaps there. A lot of the large players, and there's some argument in the business whether that's how relevant is this. So will those example transfer from a large player to a mid-sized player to a small player? I think they do, but it's not necessarily everyone's point of view. But we have seen just about every flavor deployed. The hedge funds tend to be very much ahead. They also tend to be very tight-lipped about that. But a lot of the market prediction, for example, there's a lot of technologies being used there, a lot of customer-facing exchange. So Bank of America, now I'm recalling a couple of examples. So Bank of America published, both Bank of America and the other one come back to me, their success is about their customer-facing chatbots. Right? So I think that was a lot of them start out there after the internal. In fact, let me step back. What we see, one pattern we see frequently is IT starts to experiment on the engineering side. So code development, I think it's one of the most well-established use cases. So that's one, but that's not really business-facing just yet. So it's mostly to get the sea legs under the organization and get the credibility, sort of start seeding the conversations. And on the business level, knowledge management access almost always starts with that, right? So depending on what the loan approval, for example, that's a complex process for most financial, let's say talking about banking, right? It's a complex process, and a lot of it is a lot of paperwork, a lot of regulatory requirements, and so a lot of opportunity to accelerate the process by the strategically placing LLMs in the process. And then depending on who you are, credit card companies, I think both Visa and MasterCard went public, talking about some of the threat management tools. I mean, if you think about, they have about 200 milliseconds or so to approve or decline a card. The effort that's behind that to be able to do it on the fly, and they have 200 billion transactions at any given year. So if you could break it down by second in a day, it's like, if I remember correctly, it's about 5,000 or 10,000 decisions they have to make, credit card approval or not in every second. So the infrastructure that goes into this is staggering. But again, to my earlier point, this is not new in the sense that while we now call this to AI, it started with machine learning easily 15, if not 20 years ago, depending who you are. The other example is the term algorithm. It kind of migrated into business from algorithmic trading, right? The early days of Wall Street, back in the early 2000s, that the whole concept kind of emanated from there, and we now use it and throw it around, but that's the origin. So hopefully I'm answering your question or giving some...
Yeah, that really lines up with also equipment finance is where I come from, and all of those things. One of the struggles that I'm having is, of course, our executive team loves what they're hearing about AI, and now everything that was automation, that was algorithm, that was programming is now in their eyes AI, even though we've been doing a lot of that stuff for years. So this is helpful. Thank you.
So it's a blessing and a curse in the sense that not only it's on the radar of the C-suite, and so it's not difficult to get their attention. But the difficult thing is to keep their attention, right? So if it's, as you remember the schism I was describing, how something gets sold to the C-level, but the C-level doesn't really know how to articulate that, so they just do some AI and bring back it to me and say, show it. And then there's no discernible business impact because the data asset is not in place. You don't have the storage figured out, whatever it is, all the investments that were never made, for one reason or the other, suddenly come back and present that. So you really have to be strategic how you frame that initial POC, and you have to fight back or argue back, to identify the right business KPI. That's the only thing that matters to the C-suite, business KPIs. The technical proof of concept's not going to matter too much. I mean, it is important in the process, but ultimately for the outcome standpoint, it's not going to matter too much. So that's critical. I think that's another pattern we see all the time, that they think they know what they want, but not necessarily. Other thing, since I mentioned agents and agentic AI, is RPA, right? So RPA has been around for quite some time, and a lot of people ask it to do things that it's not really cut out for, and so success, may be elusive here and there. Now you have the excuse and ability to kind of shift the dynamic and relegate RPA to what it's really good at, and then bring in the whole agentic conversation on top of that. Just said that, since we're talking about finance, so agentic tends to be also vertically driven. And in regulated industries, finance and healthcare in particular, it's very tricky because of the regulatory requirements, but those solutions are out there. So when you're traveling in your journey, just keep that in mind.
Peter, thank you again for your time this morning, and appreciate the efforts you put forth.
Thank you.